Loads, yes, but thank you so much for coming back. It's Max Easy Lessons once more. Yes, we are looking at Rubadiri's An African Thunderstorm, and yes, it says a quick analysis, but guess what, let's delve into it as much as we can. Thank you so much for stopping. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you have stayed with the channel, guess what, thank you so much for your support, and continue to keep your bells on so you will see the uploads as they come along. And yes, the uploads will be fast and quick because I have been neglecting here. So here what, let's get straight into this. The poem African Thunderstorm gives a clear description of what we would see as an ordinary thunderstorm in a rural African village. The poet definitely uses images and a number of figurative devices that brings to life how dreadful and how deadly nature can be in so many ways. And the poet also brings across to us that nature can be a tormenting force for humans in some cases. In the first stanza of the poem, we get a clear description of the build-up to the storm that is coming. Rubadiri says, from the west, clouds come hurrying with the wind, turning sharply here and there, like a plague of locusts, whirling, tossing up things on its tail, like a madman chasing nothing. Now look at the choices of words that are here in the first stanza. Right away, we understand that nature can be a deadly force. We also realize the plague of the locust. A plague of locusts, yes, that will inflict pain and quite a number of destructive elements wherever it comes along. Now, if we reflect on the Bible, and this is more like a biblical allusion in many ways, we reflect on the Bible, and we remember when the locust came as the plague, and we remember how deadly that was. In line 9, we realize as the readers that the wind is not only destructive, but that it has no direct direction or destination. It is going to come, and it is going to come hard. A madman, yes, definitely will be chasing anything and everything with no sense of purpose, with nothing to lose or nothing to gain. And so we realize that in that line 9, the wind becomes entirely destructive. And with this destruction, it tells us that it will come from any angle, any given angle, and it didn't really matter much. The madman has no thoughts, no focus, yes, and the madman can be very dangerous to everyone. And therefore, we are seeing here the comparison between the madman, the simile between the madman and the thunderstorm that is coming. Now, the second stanza describes the momentum that comes with the thunderstorm and the possible changes, yes, that may come. So the poet speaks to the pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills, like sinister dark winds. The wind whistles by, and trees bend to let it pass. Clearly, this use of imagery is very rich. It's a strong case of imagery because we can see, and we're seeing the similes again coming out in like a sinister dark winds. The third stanza gives us a picture of the chaos and the disorderliness that comes with thunderstorms. Now, of course, we can imagine people preparing, the women preparing, the children preparing for the storm that is coming. The persona says in the village, screams of delighted children. Some children are happiest to see a storm because guess what? They do not understand the dangers that a thunderstorm may bring. Toss and turn in the din of the whirling wind, women, babies clinging to their backs dart about in and out madly. The wind whistles by whilst the trees bend to let it pass. There is no doubt as to what is happening here. The women, they are familiar with the thunderstorms and the dangers that come with a thunderstorm. And so they are going about their business very quickly. They are preparing for what is coming. And even as they are preparing, the wind is building up. And the trees are already bending to allow the winds to pass through. Now, the trees bend to let it pass. Of course, that one is going to be a personification. The final stanza reveals the climax and effect of a raging thunderstorm. There is no doubt that there is chaos everywhere. Everything is going all over the place. Unfortunately, the women turn out to be the most victims because they stay at home. Then they stay at home because they want to make sure that their family is safe. Now the persona says, clothes wave like tattered flags, flying off to expose dangling breasts, as jagged blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack onomatopoeia there, amidst the smell of fire smoke and the pelting march of the storm. Now in stanza 1, from the west came the wind would refer to the Europeans in some ways. Yes, if you want to take a look at the analysis of the poem from a different perspective, then you'd want to think of colonialism as it had impacted on the African society over time. So the wind that came from the west could be referred to as the Europeans who came from the west, and of course we know them as the Westerners. The force of these wind would be similar to how the Europeans came, the Westerners came to the African region, similar to the Caribbean region, yes, and how they forcefully invaded the African continent and instilled their own values and cultural practices, even as they tossed and turned everything that the Africans stood for at the time in terms of their culture, in terms of their cultural value. Now, in this line of interpretation, like a madman chasing nothing, it would then seem that the Westerners coming there was a problem. They authoritatively roar, and this could be in reference to the guns that they fired to control the territory, the region. And the Africans now would have bowed out of the fear of them and bent their ways to allow for the adoption of Western culture. This could also mean that they do not want anything in particular, that's the Westerners, but that they want everything. Nothing specific, they just want everything, and the fact is that they wanted to conquer the territory. Now, just like a thunderstorm, it comes in, it sweeps in, and it takes control of everything that is there. It wipes out whatever it doesn't want, and it leaves just something standing. Now, this kind of dominance is common with colonization. Now, of course, we're not saying that the poem cannot be taken from the literal level where there is nature combining in all its elements to cause destruction. But at the same time, considering the background of the poet, one could also think of the poem as one that speaks to the coming of the Westerners onto the African continent. The pregnant cloud in stanza 2, and this is the first line of the stanza, it shows that the Africans are unconscious of what is going to happen when the Westerners visit. But they do know that there is more to the fierce visit of subjugation and whatever it is that they have in mind that they do not want the Africans to know. Now, this will also tie in with the wind coming from the west and the fighting, the conquering, the whole suppression of the Africans as a whole. Now, they ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills. There, of course, is also two meanings to this. One is the literal level, where whatever is happening happens because of the storm. And then there is the meaning that speaks to the colonial masters who come secretly and they go and they stay in high places. They become rulers then, colonizers. They become in control of the territory instead of the Africans who are there, thereby spreading their influence just as a thunderstorm would spread its influence across everybody, destroying everything in its wake then. The Westerners, it could be compared to them. In stanza 3, the stanza tells us that once the whites with their guns and war entered the village, of course, the children would be delighted to see them because they are innocent in all of that is going on. But when they see the destruction that the Westerners could bring to the region, the children now hang on to their mothers. They hang on to the women who are now left there to protect the children. This could also mean that the children are always the first to embrace the change, and so they welcome the Westerners that were coming. They would have welcomed the storm in a similar fashion, just as they would have welcomed the storm of colonialism, and that the women are the ones who are in charge. They are the elders, and so the poem speaks to the women. The pregnant women would be the ones who take the generation to another level because they populate the generation. However, the Westerners would have taken what they came for, and this would have caused more problems on the land. Now, those are really just two ways of looking at it. There is no hard and fast rule that you may say which is which, but bear in mind the two different analyses of it. Now, while we continue, let's talk about overall what the poem is. The poem describes a typical African thunderstorm in many ways, with all its strength and all its glory. The African society sees the rain as a blessing, and of course, they are going to gravitate towards it. They love everything that the rain will bring. They love the fact that there is new growth, there is new life. Just as a pregnant mother, there is new life, not just for the children, for everybody. Now, this means that the rain would create good opportunities for the crops and the animals, and it increases the harvest, thereby increasing the food production. Now, when we read this poem, we do not get the feeling, though, that the poet is happy, because he is so focused on telling us about the damages that the rain can bring and what it will do. So, of course, it would tie in with the meaning of, say, the colonizers coming to take over the West, because obviously, being an African, the persona should have been happy for the rains coming, as this would have added to the growth and development of the territory. But when you think more into it, it could be something else, and it would lead us into the theme of colonialism. Now, when we interpret the poem as one that is the effect of colonial domination on the native island, then we could really understand why the poet is not happy to see the rain that is coming from a thunderstorm. The time that the poet has lived in his country, his country had got independence in the 1960s, and this could also convince us of the colonialism efforts that had taken place before. Now, he was familiar with that part of his country, and it would also mean then that he could allude to the fact that the trees bend to let the wind pass, that the trees are the people who would have stood by and allowed the colonizers to come in and take control. The tattered flags speak to the nationalistic connotations and brings us to think of the poem as one of patriotism. Now, when we look at the poem, we look at the background of the poet as well. And this is one of the things that makes it important to understanding a poem. Think about the background of the poem. Think about the background of the poet. He is from Malawi. And that in itself would lend itself to the poet being able to speak about the colonization that occurred at that particular time. No, the wind is a major theme in the poem. It is mentioned 4 times, and while it is carefully examined and built upon like a main act in a plot through the 5 stanzas of the poem, we have to be conscious that the wind is very important. The poet addresses the subject of the thunderstorm in Africa. He looks at its features, he looks at what happens before, he looks at what happens as it unfolds, and he takes this within the local setting. The effects of the storm on its environment, we have this animate and inanimate idea. People and everything is just free-flowing when we look at it. We also see the poet describing nature's forces conspiring to bring the powerful storm that is coming. And then we see the narrowing of the focus of the thunderstorm on the people who are there. What happens when nature takes its course? What happens when nature becomes angry? Or, from another perspective, what happened when the colonial masters came? The poet uses simile. The poet uses metaphors, personification, alliteration, and cacophony and in the poem. And we see the figures of speech simile in line 6, like a plague of locusts. The use of simile serves to pinpoint the unrelenting force of the wind, which comes noisily and often in an unstructured pattern. Again, we see simile in lines 11 and 25. There is also metaphor. The metaphor comes in line 13. It's a great contributor to the poem, where we see that the reader understands the likeness between 2 essentially different things. Personification is used because the poet speaks in line 8 to the pregnant clouds, line 6 tossing up things on its tail, and then there is a pelting march of the storm in the last line of the poem. Alliteration, yes, the usage of words, which is the usage of words producing similar sounds or letters to manifest in the poem. Now, there is cacophony. It's the interplay of words where we get that harsh sounding words that coming from it. Some people might mistakenly call it onomatopoeia, but guess what? There is a harshness to the sound of the words, and that is very important to understanding the poem. The form and structure of the poem. The poem is divided into 2 parts, which divide the content into general and specific. The first part of the poem, we see that in stanzas 1 and 2. And when we read stanza 1 and 2, we understand that the storm is gathering a momentum. The third stanza now is the one that describes the impact that this storm will have on human existence. There is an irregularity in the number of words on each line, and when we see that, we realize that there are many single word lines, and this captures the unpredictable progress of the wind and the accompanying clouds. This technique is also clear in the second part of the poem, where there is frantic movement in the village as the women dart about in and out madly. All of those is important to the form and the structure of the poem. The poetic language, Rubadiri, he makes use of vivid imagery and figures of speech to convey the various elements of the storm. In line 6, we see the simile that speaks to the plague of locusts. Now, this gives us a straight feeling and a straight image, of the appearance and the potential that the storm has to become destructive. It also gives us the setting of Africa, and this is important. Further down, we see the simile that compares the wind to a monster as it thrashes its tail about like a madman chasing nothing in line 9. There is that emphasis on the unpredictable nature of the storm, and this in itself adds to the danger of what is happening there. Now, the description of the clouds in lines 12 to 13 being dark, sinister wings gathering on a perch on hills. Yes, this makes the cloud reminiscent of some of the more deadly birds of prey waiting for the opportunity to strike. The third stanza, though, continues in its depiction of the noise and the movement because the reader sees that the villagers are excited, they are anticipating the storm's arrival, and we also see how the children react with their screams in line 17, and these screams were not intended to be something that you would pity the people for, but the screams of the children were in delight because they see the potential danger. They do not understand the potential danger, and so they are excited for what is coming. Now, the women, on the other hand, they become nervous as they hurriedly attempt to prepare for the storm. Now, it seems, though, as if their efforts may be pointless because the storm was already on them and the clothes were waving like tattered flags, completely at the mercy of the wind. Now, again, the tattered flags there that comparison speaks to something more in the poem, that it is not just the storm. The poet makes references to the flags. What has happened to the flag when the colonial master comes in? Aren't the flags taken down then and replaced with other flags? The old flags of the old culture and the old country gets lost in its way. The poem, though, ends with the storm is breaking. There is some amount of calm, but it stops and does not hit fully. The progress of the pelting march of the storm in line 33 tells the reader that the storm cannot be stopped because it is a mighty one. The poet finally uses sound devices of onomatopoeia. The whirling, the whistling, in line 7 and 19, the whirling, the whistling in 14 and 25, the rumble, tremble, crack in line 31 of the thunder, and the impact of the lightning strike. Now, I hope this helped you. No one is saying that you have to take one view seriously and not take the literal meaning of it seriously as well. You just have to look carefully at both poems and see what gets you and what you understand from both of them. Keep a clear mind too, because you'll never know what the question is going to be like. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please feel free to do so. Keep your bell buttons on as well so that you will not be left out of any other uploads on the poems. Thank you so much for watching.